Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Pangolin Advisor and welcome yet again to BunnyQueen's Warhammer 2 tournament replays casted by yours truly. And this time around the thing that has changed is that we're no longer casting the round of 16, this time this is the semifinals. You might be surprised by the sudden jump, but the deal is that I was only asked to cast a couple of the replays from the tournament, not all of the replays. So now we magically found ourselves in the semifinals. The rules haven't changed a bit. It is still a best of 3 and it is still played on the very same maps. And this time around we'll see how Ben the Barman faces against Shidoku. So hopefully some rather exciting games. Let us go ahead and see what they have prepared for us today. As you can see, Shidoku is going to lead the orcs, whereas Ben the Barman is going to lead the high elves. And right off the bat, do you see anything interesting? Because I certainly do. I see a surprisingly elite army of goblins. Usually from the orcs you would expect, let us slow down for a second, you usually would expect to see orcs in an orc army, but this time around it's an exclusively almost goblin army. So let's have a quick look at them. Do I have the time to do that in slow motion? Maybe. So, first of all, on the left flank, it looks like both armies actually deployed heavily on the flanks, leaving almost nothing in the center, and I definitely do not have the time to keep this at slow motion because things are about to start going down ASAP. So let me introduce to you the armies of each player real quick. Firstly, the High Elves, because this will take me less time. First up, we've got Shadow Warriors. That's a very uncommon and unusual pick. They have... well, they're very versatile, they're usually hidden because of their stock ability, and they keep firing while moving at any target in their vicinity. So they're quite good for kiting the enemies, and there are 2 groups of them on each flank. Next up, we've got 3 units of spearmen there to hold the line for the rest of the High Elf army. We've got 1 and... 1 more unit of Dragon Princes, so 2 of those. We have seen them before, very effective shock cavalry, good against pretty much everything. 1 unit of Sisters of Avalon, powerful magical damage, very good if the orcs decided to bring something heavier to the table. We've got a Mage of Life with the classical spells that rejuvenate life and also replenish a bunch of Winds of Magic power reserve. So that is good. A princess on a Star Dragon mount, so she's going to be quite scary and very good against the orcs, able to terrify them to bits. Orcs have notoriously bad leadership, you see. And 2 units of Illyrian River archers, one on each flank. Again, a skirmishing, kiting kind of unit that is there to poke holes at the enemy before the enemy can do anything. So it looks like the High Elves will just try to basically dip on every front, not knowing what the orcs would do, and they would try to out-skirmish them, bleed them before the orcs engaged. Interesting way of dealing against the Orcan Wa. Now let us move to the slow motion and see the Orcan army. So first of all we can see the Morab Manji Marauders, that being the Goblin Wolf Archers, a regiment of renown of those. Moving forward, and they do have some good armor-piercing missile damage, so they're just going to move forward and try to pierce through the enemy armor. But Shadow Warriors actually do not have a lot of armor. One of the few elven units that isn't very good at defending against enemy incoming missile fire. Next up, we've got 2 units of Nasty Skulkers with maximum rank. That's right, maximum rank. Now the curious thing about rank is that, in my opinion, it's most effective on numerous units because its bonus is most multiplied in that scenario. And the Nasty Skulkers, where there's 120 of them, and they also have a very nifty ability that allows them to be more effective in combat if they happen to be winning it. Of course, they don't have to win it, this ability simply recharges whenever they do win it. So, yeah, they're very powerful actually, and it's surprisingly good at taking down larger threats due to their ability to bypass the enemy armor. They of course have stock and Vanguard deployment. Stock very important against the High Elves, allowing them to avoid most of the enemy missile fire until it is too late. Next up, we've got a unit of Forest Goblin Spider Riders, basically cavalry that just ignores forest penalties. And they also have poison attacks, very good at making the enemy less effective in combat. Finally, we have some regular good old Night Goblins. Night Goblins surprisingly useful, even though you would consider the stats to be terrible, but actually they're not. They do have poison attacks, even though they're very cheap to recruit actually. So they can again reduce the enemy. They can just butter your bread so very well for your for the rest of your army, because they can weaken the enemy units. Even the elite ones will suffer a lot from this poison, especially, actually, the elite units will suffer the most. So, considering the Night Goblins, and even if the Night Goblins die, it's okay, they're expendable. They will not cause our Orc units to chain route as a result. But honestly, they're going to do pretty okay on their own. For their cost, they're very nice. I like them a lot, personally. And finally, we've got Rusty Arrows, which are a regiment of renowned Night Goblin archers. They have armor-centering missiles, so again, a way to bypass the enemy armor. A lot of ways to deal with elite elven units in here. And one unit of Orc Boar Biggins, which are basically just orcs on boars. Basically the only orcs we've seen on this battlefield. On the right flank, it seems like the mirror of what we've seen on the left flank. And in the center, the only unit that the orcs deployed is actually Azak the Slaughterer, with a few core spells such as, for instance, the Spirit Leech and the Fate of Bjuna. I have no idea how to say that, I'm very sorry. And yeah, he's going to be able to cause terror as well, which is nice. And again, even more poison attack. So before I start this replay, I'm going to say that what I'm seeing right here is the Orc player trying to create as many opportunities for the Nasty Skulkers to be able to recharge their opportunistic melee by debuffing the enemy army whenever possible and just tearing it to shreds with some very elite Night Goblins, because I forgot to mention this, but the Night Goblins, they also have very high rank 6, so their stats are boosted up to 11. So this is going to be an interesting fight, and the High Elves should retreat. The High Elves are about to be overrun on all fronts. If they do not, they need to send in their middle and probably try to focus on one flank. This flank, I mean, it's going to be lost. I'll just retreat from this and sacrifice the Shadow Warriors if possible. Although it would have been tempting to maybe engage with the Dragon Princess, but they might be tied up, and with the poison it will be very difficult to untie the units. On the second flank, the same things are happening, but it seems like they're happening a little bit slower, and with the Princess's attention turned to the left flank, it could be quite a ride for the High Elves. The Spearmen are standing firm, trying to shield the archers from the enemy Night Goblin attacks, and the archers with their Shadow Wars, they can keep kiting the enemy. Same goes for the Alien Reaver archers, they can fire while moving as well. The Goblin Riders, they'll have a few there against the Death Creepers and everything else. All the Death Creepers, of course, they will poison the Dragon Riders. Meanwhile, on the right flank, things are going haywire for the High Elves, and as you can see, their units are breaking the... Of course, the Dragon Princes, they are still in the fight, and they're going to do very well against the Nasty Skulkers. Nasty Skulkers with maximum level, they're going to... They're a good unit, but these are the Dragon Princes we're talking about. However, there is Azak the Slaughterer on the battlefield, and he's going to even the odds and terrify the High Elven units. And look how long the Spearman can last, but however, lasting for long isn't really meaningful here. Like, this Spearman unit isn't doing anything. It's supposed to protect the rest of the Elven army. Right now, it isn't really doing that. Those units, they are still suffering, and the Spirit Leech being popped down on the Dragon Princes, they need to run out of here. Like I said, the Elves need to surround, and they need to fall back into one location they can defend confidently, because with this amount of cheap but very well trained units of Goblins, the Goblins can just overrun the High Elves. They need to establish a defensive perimeter, but right now they're just falling back. There's only one unit of the Spearmen to hold the enemy. The other unit of Spearmen broke, and the Princess hasn't landed yet. In my opinion, mistake. Sure, it is kind of scary to land against all of those missile troops and whatnot, and of course the Nasty Skulkers, they can just pierce through the Dragon's armor quite well, but it is still a Dragon and a Princess riding it, and with the assist of the Dragon Princess, they could potentially hold the line, break the enemy, and hopefully keep the enemy broken and just escort them to the edge of the battlefield, which is very nearby, by the way. So the biggest weakness of the Orc units in this matchup is the fact that they are very easily broken. So if the High Elves can just escort all of the Orcs, or rather Goblins, on this side to the edge of the battlefield, make sure they never return, this would even the odds. But right now the odds are shifting in the Orcs' favor, as the High Elves weren't able to do it just yet. And as you can see, Nasty Skulkers are engaging in combat with Dragon Princess, and Nasty Skulkers are doing alright because of the ridiculous amount of rank, and because of the fact that they can just stay in the melee for a prolonged amount of time. The Dragon Princess, they should have been psycho-charging, they was unable to do so, and it took a dragon to even the odds, really, in the Dragon Princess' favor, which is incredible because, of course, the Dragon Princess are notoriously known for their eliteness and their cost. And in here you can see that the Alien Reaver archers actually used as a regular shock cavalry. They're not very good for that task, not good at all, in fact, but this was a good call. It saved the Sisters of Avalon from being overrun. I'm not entirely sure why the Sisters of Avalon are running forward. This is a bad idea. They should be deploying on the top of the hill to be protected by the rest of the High Elven army, but nonetheless, this is the thing that is happening, and I can see that the Alien archers are breaking. The sacrifice would have been remembered, but right now the Sisters of Avalon, they really shouldn't be here, and they're now engaging melee. The Star Dragon is somewhere far away, fighting Death Creepers. I mean, of course it's going to win, but that's not really where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be terrifying as many of the goblin units as possible, and this seems to be a doom by now. The Mage of Life, haven't seen him cast too many of his healing spells, honestly, as you can see that all of the high elf units are basically rotting or dead and or dying, one or the other really, and that mage and that princess are almost the only units that are left for the high elves. The Shadow Warriors and the Sisters of Avalon are being overrun. By now, maybe I'll just sacrifice the Sisters of Avalon and try to save Shadow Warriors run away, because they can still kite the enemy quite effectively. And War being popped, I was actually wondering why the War wasn't being popped earlier. War is extremely powerful, it allows the Orc units to just win basically almost any encounter very easily. I was expecting to see it at the very start of the fight, when the Goblins committed on both sides to fight against the High Elves. This would have made the fight much easier and much faster for them. But alas, it seems like it wasn't necessary, and the Orcs were able to decisively win, even without using the War. Right now, I feel like this is just for show. This is to show the Eye of Scam how truly superior the Orcs are to them. And now the princess lands, and she's trying to put up a valiant last stand, but this is all over. I see no way for her to survive. Her wizard already broke, her other units have broken as well, and this is at the end for the High Elves. A very, very convincing victory for the Orcs, one of the better displays, honestly. Let's end the replay and talk a little bit about what could have been changed and about the army setup. So, when it comes to Shidoku, I have nothing to say, but wow, that was very good actually. A really nice competitive build that not too many players would expect. And what do you do against that? Like, this was a very nice build, and on paper, amusingly enough, Barman's build could have countered it. Like, he had a lot of skirmishing units, he had the Living Reaver Archers and Shadow Warriors, and he could have just bled the enemy while the enemy would slowly creep forward. The issue is, of course, that Shidoku prepared for that. He had a bunch of cavalry of his own, but High Elves do have superior cavalry to anything else, so maybe they could have just tried to deploy in one location rather than just split super thin on every flank possible. At which point the High Elves were just not able to defend anything, and they were just overrun on every flank, which wasn't really ideal. Whereas if they focus one flank, like the Orc units, they tend to run away and then come back, but if they were close to the edge of the map, the High Elves could have just chased the Orcs off of the map and maybe win the game in that way. So even without changing anything, I believe the High Elves would have stand a much better chance at this matchup if only they deployed in a better position rather than trying to spread themselves so very thin against the Orcs. On paper, I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to skirmish the enemy, but I don't think it was done properly. And honestly, another thing, before I move on to the next replay, is the Shadow Warriors themselves. In my opinion, they are just very poor investment. They deal almost exactly the same amount of damage as the regular archers. But regular archers cost you, what, 450 or 75 gold? Whereas Shadow Warriors cost you 850. Sure, Shadow Warriors, as I said, they are good for kiting the enemy units, but the Orcs have a lot of fast units, so Shadow Warriors were clearly out of their element in this regard. And I'd rather see those two Shadow Warriors turned into archers, and there could be another archer made out of that. Or maybe if they were able to scrap some money out of somewhere, this could have been two archers instead of the two Shadow Warriors and one unit of White Lions. Although, admittedly, I don't even know how White Lions would perform against that. Like, this is real craziness and madness. But at least the High Elves would have had a little bit more bodies to delay the Goblin incursion and allow the archers to fire, because all of those Goblins, they had very little armor. And of course they had stock, but as soon as they were revealed, the High Elf archers could have just had field day with them, especially with the assistance of a Lyrian Reaver archers, which performed very poorly considering the enemy army. So yeah, I would rather see something like that. Or you know what, you could have just exchanged those Shadow Warriors to archers and be able to afford maybe one more Lyrian Reaver. I'm trying to do the math. But even if not, you could just sacrifice some more abilities to make it work. I'm sure this would work out better than using Shadow Warriors. They do underperform. This one unit did okay, but only because of situational events. This unit, I mean, you see what happened. It was very underperforming. With that in mind, let us move on to the next replay. Excellent, and now we see Shidoku leading the Beastmen while Ben the Barman is leading the Tomb Kings, and this seems to be a very interesting matchup, one that I personally would struggle with, as Tomb Kings are my personal favorites, and Beastmen, oh, they're just so scary, and they have a lot of good options at eliminating the Tomb Kings' abilities. Let me check the battlefield. Do I have the time? I actually do. This is unusual because Beastmen are very rush-heavy, rush-oriented, aggressive factions. So let's see if I can actually introduce them fast enough for you, as the carrions are getting shot and engaging the enemy already. So we've got on the right flank 2 units of Centaurs with throwing axes. One with throwing axes and one with great weapons. Centaurs are the key units and the symbolic units for the Beastmen. Very fast, and the throwing axes in particular, they have armor-piercing missiles, so they can just tear the Tomb King constructs to shreds while also dodging all of the Tomb King's units. The only unit that can catch up to the Centaurs are the Carrion, but of course the Centaurs, they are no pushovers in melee fight either, and they are also the great weapon variant of Centaurs, which again are very fast. They can flank around the Tomb King's army and just lay them to rest. The weakness of them is that they have very low armor. I mean, not very, but relatively low armor, and Tomb Kings have actually surprisingly good archers, so this is something to watch out for. On the left flank, we've got a similar setup, except this time it's with regular Centaurs at the front, guarding the 2 Centaurs with throwing axes. So again, some skirmishers that are very good at taking enemy armor targets from afar. Probably a waste to use them against Carrion in my opinion, but whatever. And the Centaurs themselves, they're just there to stay. They can tie up the enemy cavalry if the enemy does have cavalry, and buy more time for the rest of the Centaurs to run circles around the enemy cavalry. Next up, we've got 2 units of Angar Spearmen ahead with shields. Again, bringing shields into this fight is probably a good idea. Of course, regular Angar Spearmen, if I'm thinking about the right unit, have stock, which is even better at avoiding missile damage, but those units, they are here to basically be a buffer for the rest of the Beastmen units, so this is a very good idea to bring those guys. With the shields, they will be able to stand tall against the missiles for a while. Next up, we've got the Goalhead with shields. Again, shielded variant, very good, and it also has some pretty decent stats, so it's going to do very well in prolonged melee encounter. I probably wouldn't deploy it so close to the front line, but such is the way of things, as it turns out. And actually, this is I changed my mind. This is not a bad idea, because what they are guarding is an even more valuable unit. They have a Bestigo head, which is, I mean, they are here to be a counter to whatever Ushapti the Tomb Kings might bring. And Tomb Kings, like 9 times out of 10, they will bring some form of Ushapti, and 10 times out of 10, they will summon an Ushapti unit. Bestigo head can fight toe-to-toe with them and exchange some blows. I'm not entirely sure who would win that fight. Maybe the Ushapti, but I would have to check actually. And finally, we've got the Bestigo head Regiment of Renown, the Halberd Infantry, Kozarak's Man Repairs, Korok's Man Repairs, sorry again for butchering the pronunciation. And they're just very good against large constructs. Again, a good decision to bring them to this matchup. And finally, 2 more units of Ungar Spearmen with shields guarding the flanks. Good idea, because Tomb Kings also have some mobile flankers, and the chariots are also notoriously good, so bring those guys to shoot the rest of your army. Again, as I said, a good idea. Finally, we've got 2 units of Gorballs. Gorballs, they had some tough times in the past, but as of the relatively recent buff, they are actually very good units at taking down enemy large units, such as the Tomb King's notoriously famous constructs. And finally, for the hero or lord of this army, we've got Malagor the Dark Omen, who, does he actually have the Summon Centaur ability? Unholy Power? No, I do not. I might be crazy, but I don't, that's very surprising. So, usually when you bring Malagor the Dark Omen, because of his lore magic, you expect to see Summon Sanger ability on him, which allows him to bring a free Sanger, which is basically like an artillery piece, a very good one at that. And that's like a unit for free. Of course, it degrades over time, as all summoned units do, but it's very cost efficient, so I'm surprised not to see that on him. But, well, maybe he just didn't have enough money after this very, very wide army, which can just run circles around the Tomb Kings. Meanwhile, the Tomb Kings, they have a unit of Skeletal Spearmen on each flank. Good idea, you always need to have those against the notoriously scary and flanking Beastmen. We've got a unit of Tomb Kings with Halberds, and a unit of King Nekesh's Scorpion Leader. Those guys have poison, very good idea to bring them against the Beastmen, as poison is very good at slowing the enemy down and weakening them and tying them in one place. So a lot of cavalry, anti-cavalry options, good for the Tomb Kings to bring them. That's going to pay off dividends very fast. Next up, we've got 2 units of archers, one of them being the Blessed Region of Flag? I don't know how to say that, honestly. Either way, those guys, they have armor sundering. Probably not a very good idea to bring them against the Beastmen, because Beastmen usually don't have very good armor or very good shooting. At most, bronze shooting with almost no armor. I would rather just bring regular archers, but I mean, this Blessed Region is still going to pay dividends, in my opinion. Finally, you've got 3 units of Ushapti with great bows, one of them being the Chosen of the Gods. Again, same deal with armor sundering for those guys. Or rather, wait, they have armor sundering and shield break. No, they have shield breaker, never mind, so they can just break through the enemy shields. So okay, that is fairly decent. The enemy does have a lot of shields. But overall, the thing I'm worried most about for the Tomb King's army is the fact that it has a lot of archers, and it's very difficult to protect your archers against such fast army as the Beastmen. I mean, look at this, the engagement is already underway. Oh, and there were 2 units of carrion, but one is taking damage, and the other one, it is chasing something. Oh, and of course, super important, the Tomb Scorpion. Very powerful, probably the MVP for the Tomb King's army. Is going to trade very well against anything the Beastmen can bring, with the exception of maybe the Gorbals. Now, the engagements have already started. I can see some Skeleton Warriors engaging against some Goreheads. Oh yeah, and there are Skeleton Warriors on the battlefield. Some basic chaff, a meat shield, that's all they serve, but they can trade okay with Ongors, I suppose. Ongor Spearmen, to be more specific, they will do okay against. And have I missed something? Oh yeah, the Lord, of course. We've got Arkan the Black himself. Arkan the Black, a very nice choice. He's got a bunch of nifty spells, and he can summon some skeletons as well. And it's going to be very important at tying the Beastmen down, so a good choice in Lords, in my opinion. So let us finally move on to regular speed. This is going to be a difficult one to cast. As I said, the Beastmen are super good at flanking and super good at getting to the enemy. They are one of the fastest, if not the fastest faction in the game right now. So the cannon are being shut down from the sky, and I can see a unit of Skeleton Warriors summoned immediately, as all of the archers from the Tomb Kings are trying desperately to pepper the Beastmen with arrows, but as you can see, the front line is already breaking under the enormous pressure that the Blackhorn Ravagers are putting. And of course, we can see the Gorbals being put at, being in their home tab, trying to murder the Ushapti, and the Gorbals, I mean, they're made to fight the Ushapti and other constructs. Meanwhile, the left flank, it is not going very well for the Beastmen, as the Tomb Scorpion has engaged, and the Tomb Scorpion... My bad. And the Tomb Scorpion is going to perform very well against the Beastmen, who are already breaking under the enormous archer fire. So the left flank is collapsing. Meanwhile, the right flank, I mean, the Beastmen are having a field day with this. They are able to outmaneuver the Tomb Kings, and they're going to soon enough probably try to flank the archers and silence them for good. Although they should be doing so right now instead of running. I have no idea to where those guys are running. Nevertheless, they are performing relatively well on this flank, and they are cleaning the carrion. Those guys should not bother with the carrion. They should just ignore it, run past it, and go after the enemy archers. Right now, the Ungor Spearmen, they're engaging some Tomb King's Spearmen. Those are meaningless ones fights, but this is good because this is tying the Tomb King's infantry. This is allowing it to protect the archers, and as you can see, the Centaurs are already on the prey, doing very well. And the enemy army, wow, the Tomb Kings already had to spawn the Ushapti. Just 2 minutes in, the Ushapti have spawned. This is the end for the Tomb King's ability to resurrect the units. And oh wow, I missed this, but Arkan the Black, he just made a reckless charge on his chariot forward, and he was just wrecked by the Gorbals. Gorbals very good at killing charioted lords such as Arkan the Black, and Arkan the Black shouldn't be here. He's fighting the Centaurs. Centaurs can just surround him and disallow him to come back. Now the archers are laying suppressive fire, and they will be able to just wreck the Gorbals. And as you can see, the Gorbal is fleeing from the amount of archers. So like I said, in terms of archers, the Tomb Kings are doing very well, and in a prolonged combat, the Tomb Kings are guaranteed to win this fight. They also have a Tomb King which is just wrecking havoc amongst the Beastmen, or it should be, but its Q count is actually relatively low, lower than expected. But as you can see, right now the Tomb Kings have to commit the Skeleton Archers to protect the Ushapti Great Balls. Now, of course, Ushapti Great Balls, maybe they are the ones that should have been committed, because Ushapti Great Balls, they still are very good melee combatants, whereas Skeleton Archers, they are not good at melee combating. And Arkan the Black again found himself in not the best situation, as he's still being surrounded by Centaurs, and he cannot run away. Actually, there's of course Malagor the Dark Omen nearby, and the Gorbo is here to finish Arkan the Black, and there's nothing he can do. Like, I can see a lot of Ushapti Great Ball fire trying to finish off the Gorbo, but this is not good enough, and Arkan the Black is now crumbling to dust on the battlefield, unable to return. The Toon Kings are rallying, they have a pocket of strength in the middle, they're going to fight the Beastmen head on, and they're trying to break the Beastmen. Well, with the Toon King, Toon Scorpion rather, they're going to do quite well, but the Skeleton Archers and the Disruptive Greatbows are unprotected. They were left by the Toon Scorpion, who should have been protecting them to the last of its abilities. Same goes for the Skeleton Warriors, they're being put away, where the Centaurs can just dance around the Toon Kings formation, and the Ushapti are the last chance for the Toon Kings, but the balance of power is shifting heavily towards the Toon Kings, not in the Toon Kings, but rather in the Beastmen favor, and there is nothing right now the Beastmen can do to lose this fight. The Toon Kings cannot return to this fight either. Like, this is probably the done deal. Also, Shopti, they are still paying dividends, but actually they got very few kills, all things considered. That being said, this is because they were focusing quite heavily on the Gobo, trying to finish it off, but while they were able to rout one Gobo, the other Gobo killed Ark and the Black, so those Shopti didn't pay for themselves all that well, and now everything is falling apart. The Toon Scorpion, it's very good anti-infantry specialist, but it's not going to do very well against Korak's mana repairs, or against the Gorbo for that matter either. And the Toon Scorpion dies, it explodes, and now this is the end. That's all they said. And wow, that was super action-packed replay, don't get me wrong, and very exciting and very fun. Like, that was very cool. Carnage we just saw, very fast-paced as well. But Shidoku just outperformed Ben the Barman quite nicely. Not saying that Ben the Barman did poorly, I liked his ideas, and the Toon Kings build, it was good, and things were fine, but Shidoku was just, man, this man was on point. I did see a few micro mistakes, maybe some charges that could have been done better, and chasing the carrion, again, not the best idea, but the builds from this guy, they're very solid. And Beastman, okay, so let me talk a little bit about what caused the Toon Kings the game and didn't have to. So the Toon Kings, one of their strengths is their archer line. They have some very good archers, despite you thinking that, well, the end typically have bad archers. Well, not the Toon Kings, they have very good ones, actually. But I think they over-invested in archers. 3 Sharptooth Greatbows and 2 Skeleton Archers against such a mobile faction as Beastmen is suicide. The Beastmen can just, like I said, run circles around the enemy archer line, and I'd much rather just see some of those units exchanged. Moreover, the Carrion. So, I'll tell you what the deal with the Carrion is. The Carrion is very good at pinning down enemy targets or killing the artillery. So, bringing the Carrion I certainly see as a good decision if you have the cavalry to support the Carrion, or rather are able to have the Carrion support the cavalry. Because the idea I have in my head when I see the Carrion on a Toon Kings player facing against the Beastmen is that first you're gonna send in the Carrion to engage the Centaurs, because Carrion are the only unit that the Toon Kings have that is faster than the Centaurs. Then, once the Centaurs are engaged in melee and stuck for a moment, you can send in whatever cavalry unit you bring onto the battlefield to attack the Centaurs. And even the Hekara Horsemen, they can fight alright against the Centaurs, they actually have comparable stats. The only weakness of the Hekara Horsemen is that they are slower, so on their own they cannot catch up. But working in conjunction with the Carrions, they can actually protect the Toon Kings' flanks quite nicely. So, if the Toon Kings brought in some horsemen, would have been nice. Or even better yet, the Specular Stalkers, or the whatever units, I forgot the name of the other units, doesn't matter. But bringing some cavalry would have been nice. Or just abandoning the Carrion altogether, although it is not a bad idea to tie up the enemy units in some cases, but bringing instead 2 extra units of spearmen, just regular skeleton spearmen, would be a better choice in my opinion. And even then, this would, just with this army alone, without changing the archer line, this would be not far better results in my opinion. And it would be even better if you were to modify the archer line a little bit. And for instance, bring the Necrosphinx. A Necrosphinx would just tear through the enemy large units like the Gobles, or whatever the cavalry would try to engage. Necrosphinx would have been there. Or, if not the Necrosphinx, bringing in at the very least something like Tomb Guards, more Tomb Guards with halberds, or just even the regular Tomb Guards to fight against the Ongor heads and whatever other heads there were. That would have been a fine decision. But either way, while I did have some reservations regarding Ben the Barman's build, like, this is the wrong way to put it. Ben the Barman's build, it's very solid. I think it's not necessarily well suited for this particular fight against the Beastmen, but against many other empires, that would be a very terrifying build to have. Either way, that was fun. And that's all for me. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. This was Pangolin Advisor, and I'll see you online.